our goal is to bring governance to the sport and get the sport recognized by the International Olympic Committee and accepted by the global sporting community, with an ultimate goal of getting the sport into the Olympic Games.
We're live. Talks with Tim Ulrich Deschamps. Today we have Gretchen Kittelberger as a guest. I think 4 times CrossFit Games athlete and president of the iF3. Gretchen, how are you doing? Welcome on the show.
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I hope I was right with the 4 times.
Yes. Yep. You're correct. 2011 through 2014.
Yeah, that's what I was guessing, because last week I watched the regionals from 2011 on YouTube. So I'm a nut. I go through the CrossFit YouTube channel and watch it from the beginning now, because I've watched everything from this year and stuff. Mm-hmm. And there was an interview of you, and I was like, I remember that girl. What is she doing at the moment? And then I find out about the iF3, and I thought it would be amazing to have you as a guest on the show. So my first question would be, when did you actually fall in love with the sport, and how did that happen?
Yeah. So I was, before starting, CrossFit, I was a gymnast. And I graduated from college. And when you're, college age for a gymnast, that's already pretty old and over the hill. And I didn't have, a sport or anything that I was really doing after that. And one of my old teammates actually recommended, you should try this CrossFit thing. I think you would really like it. It has some elements of gymnastics in it. You would be good at it. So I looked it up, and that was in the beginning of 2009. And I started, I would look at the CrossFit main site at that time, and I would I was in law school at that point. So I go to the rec center on campus, and I would do whatever the main site workout was. And that was just kind of my thing. And eventually, the first CrossFit affiliate opened in that town. It's a really small college town. And so I started going to that gym, and the guys who owned it were like, oh, you can compete in this. There's like this CrossFit Games thing. And I was like, well, that sounds amazing. Like, I would love to compete. And that's sort of how I kind of discovered the sport and discovered that you could compete in it, and got into it from there. I did my first regionals in 2010 and finished 5th and didn't make the games, and then made my first games in 2011.
Awesome. And then there was a full ride, I guess. So when was I remember you said in that interview, because you studied law, didn't you? Mm-hmm. And you said in that interview, I think it was Savan who asked something like, what's the longevity of a CrossFit athlete? And you said, my mind is going to last a lot longer than my legs. So when was the decision to go on the planning side of the sport and leave your athlete career behind?
Yeah, I sort of kind of, I guess, tapered out of competing. I did regionals in 2015 and didn't make the games that year, and that was sort of my last year of regionals. And I kind of did the open casually for a couple of years after that. But then sort of realized, my heart just wasn't in it anymore, in terms of wanting to put the time in, wanting to push that hard. And really it was 2016 when I first had the idea for the iF3, and really kind of started to realize, all right, well, I would love to, see this sport grow in sort of another avenue and have different opportunities for athletes. And I was in a place at that time where I had the time and kind of the opportunity and the understanding of how to do it and how to start the federation. So that was really kind of the point for me where I started to make the transition. And as we started the iF3 and as that got bigger, it just became more and more important to me. And it became more important to me than, my own training and my own competing as an athlete. So it was sort of this this slow shift of sort of dialing back the competing and the training, and finding a real passion for the governance side of the sport, and creating opportunities for other people to kind of to follow the path that I had and be able to compete at the highest level, and really expanding those opportunities for them.
Cool. Yeah, when I read about the iF3, it was like an opening my eyes moment for a moment, because like you explain it like in comparison to the NBA, like CrossFit is the brand and functional fitness is the sport. And I was like, yeah, because everybody is always talking, we're doing CrossFit, but that's not really what it is. We're doing functional fitness, and CrossFit is just a brand. So can you explain to our viewers what the iF3 is all about, and what's the main goal of the thing?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So iF3 stands for International Functional Fitness Federation, and we are a nonprofit organization, and our goal is to bring governance to the sport, and get the sport recognized by the International Olympic Committee and accepted by the global sporting community, with an ultimate goal of getting the sport into the Olympic Games. And like you said, yeah, the distinction between, CrossFit as a brand and functional fitness as a sport is really important, because, for purposes of the Olympic movement, brands cannot be sports. Sports are, seen as for the good of the people, right? And not owned by anybody. Nobody can own a sport. Whereas brands have ownership, and, people get to make certain decisions without sometimes the benefit of the sport long term, or the good of the athletes, is not taken into consideration in a private company, because it doesn't have to be, right? The company has other goals, versus when you're talking about nonprofit sports governance, the goal is grow the sport. That's it, right? The profit motive is not there. So that's like a really important distinction between brand and sport, and something that we really try to prioritize in our mission.
Mm-hmm. So the main goal is to get the sport of functional fitness to the Olympics. So I was wondering, like, because when I look at the sports landscape in Germany or in Europe, the biggest sports are like soccer or basketball and stuff, and that's at the Olympics. But in our view, in Europe, it's not that big of a deal, like for the spectator at least. Like the FIFA World Cup or the Champions League is way more important than the Olympics, But on the athlete side, it's a different story, I think. But is the Olympics in America, is it really that big event anymore that's everybody is striving to get there?
I think it's dependent on the sport, right? So like I was a gymnast. So in gymnastics, the Olympics is the goal, right? That's it. There's nothing else. College and a college scholarship is big as well. But, as a kid, you dream about the Olympics, and that's it. Whereas I would say in America, for something like basketball, even though it's in the Olympics, that's not necessarily what little kid basketball players growing up dreaming about. They grow up dreaming about being LeBron, right, and being in the NBA. So I think it's different depending on the sport. But that being said, right, why do people like LeBron, right, or Michael Jordan back in his day, or any of these big name NBA players, they still go play on Team USA and go to the Olympics, right? There's still, even though there might be other leagues or other things that are important and that people, maybe care about in some sense more, the Olympics still has, like, it's really this largest sporting stage, and those NBA players, they still want to go play and represent their country, and that idea of representing your country, I think, is really huge and important.
Yeah, I think so too. And do you see, like, when I thought about it, like, functional fitness, it has like so many variables, and it's so exciting to watch. Like if you watch any competition, as let it be the CrossFit Games or Waterpalooza or your events or whatever it is, it's so much fun to watch, but the sport has so much variety in it. Like it has strength, it has weightlifting, it has gymnastics, it has endurance stuff in it. And some parts of it are already like in the Olympics, like Olympic weightlifting or gymnastics, for example. Do you see a problem with it being so variable that this could be hard to implement at the Olympics, or do you see that as not a problem?
So that's a good question. I think there's a couple parts to it. The first part, in terms of the variety, right, and how, I guess, undefined the sport has been previously, we've tried to address that at the iF3, and we've added a little more structure to the sport. So if you look at the branded events, right, the CrossFit Games and their system, there's not a whole lot of structure in terms of, well, how many events, what's going to be in each thing, what movements are even eligible to be included as part of the recognition process, right? Even to get into recognized by the IOC and, some of these other organizations, we had to address that first. So the big thing was, well, athletes need to know what they're preparing for in this sport. So they need to know what movements they're going to be asked to do. So we created essentially a book of movements. And it's hundreds of pages long, right? And it has hundreds of movements in there. And we tried to think of every single movement that, you possibly could. And definitely the first go around, we missed some things, but that's, we are able to update it on a season basis. So we've gotten pretty much everything in there by now. But that book tells you, okay, handstand push-ups are in the book. This is how they're judged, right? Pull-ups are in the book. This is how they're judged. And it has the movement and the standard that you're going to be judged by for the entire season. So athletes aren't surprised, right, the day before an event when suddenly the handstand push-up standard is different than what they've been training. It's very clear, what those standards are. So that's kind of the first part, is just, all right, what is the base of movements we can select from? And then beyond that, the next part of it is, all right, well, we need to have a little more structure on our competitions so that when I go to, these guys at the IOC who don't know this sport, who a lot of them, are honestly older, we have to be able to explain it. We can't just walk into a room and say, like, this sport is anything and it's everything and you never know what's coming, because we'll get laughed out of the room. So we added some structure to it. We said, all right, for functional fitness competition under the iF3, every, our international world championship level, it's going to be 6 tests, we call them. So 6 tests, and we put them in categories. So one test is going to be endurance. One test is going to test strength. One's going to test the ability to move your own body weight. One is going to be a mixed test, which you can think of kind of as like a free category, anything mixed up in there. One test is going to be skill. So it's going to have your higher level skill things in there. And then one test is going to be power. So testing that really short, fast timed range. So we have these generic categories. And then in there, within those categories, those 6 tests, it still changes. You still have your variance, but we've added just enough structure on it so that we can say, well, the sport is these 6 things. It's all these movements, but you don't know which one's coming up in which category, but these qualities are going to be tested. So that's how we've kind of gotten around the, the issue of, oh, it's too varied. It's too crazy. And, putting a little definition on it that way. The other part of your question, about comparing it to other sports, that's something that kind of gets worked out in the process we're in right now, where other sports can express if there's concern about, hey, this is similar, this is not, so as we're working through this recognition process, we work through those issues. But if you look at it, there are tons of sports that have similarities, right? Triathlon's a great example. So triathlon has its own federation. If you break down triathlon, what is it, right? Running, biking, and swimming. And each of those has their own federation, right? We have athletics, and we have FINA is all the aquatic sports, and then UCI, the cycling union. So it's kind of the same concept as that, basically.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Like if you take it away from the Olympic standpoint, or comparing sports, like they interconnect and they feed from each other. I think I was just watching the European weightlifting championships this morning, and there's so many girls and guys from the functional fitness world, like Laura Horvath or Tui Helgadottir was there, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
They feed from each other.
Yeah, and it's great, right? It's great for all the sports because, you know, people I think get exposed to the barbell in functional fitness, right? They learn, okay, learn about it, maybe learn these movements for the first time, and then they're like, well, wait, I don't really like this whole getting out of breath thing, but I love this lifting heavy thing. And then they transition to weightlifting or powerlifting or some of these other, strength sports. And then those sports grow, right? So there's really this really cool thing where the sports do, like you said, feed off of each other and help each other grow. So that's something we're looking forward to as well as we kind of go through these processes, working with the other federations to figure out, okay, how do we make this better for everybody? How do we make all these sports grow together and become more popular?
Yeah. Something interesting which popped up on my Instagram feed was your post about this Canadian athlete who was working out in his gym and was shut down for the police because they said that CrossFit was not a official sport in Canada. So I was completely blown away by that fact. And what is necessary to be an official sport? And do you guys work on that too? And how far are we in this process?
Yeah, so it's definitely a long process, right? And it depends. Every country is different. But generally what you need, right? So on the international level, we have to get our recognitions, and there's kind of the twofold process for that. First, you have to get recognized by an organization called the Global Association of International Sports Federations, and we've been in their process since 2018. So it takes a long time, right? And we're working with them so we can get all our requirements met there, and then you go on to your IOC, International Olympic Committee recognition. So that's what we do on the international side. And once you're through that, there's a lot more global acceptance of your sport. The same thing happens in each country. So while we're the international federation, there are national federations in each country. Well, eventually each country. Right now we have about 45, but there are 206 IOC recognized countries, and we want eventually federations in all of them. But that obviously is most sports do not have that, but that's an eventual, goal to strive for. So what happens in each country, they have their federation, and that federation then has to get recognized by their Ministry of Sport and the National Olympic Committee. And most countries have a Ministry of Sport and a separate National Olympic Committee. The U.S. is different. There's the U.S. and I think 3 or 4 others that don't have a Ministry of Sport. What requirements you need to meet to do that varies country by country. So we have some countries that have done it already. So in Norway, right, functional fitness is a recognized sport. They're recognized by the National Olympic Committee. And with that comes a lot of advantages. They're getting anti-doping, right, drug testing at their events by the Norwegian Anti-Doping Association. They can get funding, and they have gotten funding from their government in order to, they've been able to hire some full-time staff. They actually give stipends to athletes to pay for their training. They can get some money for events. A lot of these advantages come from being recognized. And we've seen during the pandemic, one of those advantages is, if you're recognized as a sport in your country, then, you're depending on the rules of the country. Obviously, things have been very different country in the pandemic, but your facilities can stay open. The elite athletes can train in those facilities, things like that. And we've seen that happen in several countries. So Canada, specifically talking about, Cedric Lapointe and his issues, the requirements in Canada are hard to get the sport recognized. So you need to have your national federation, and then they have provinces in Canada. So you have to have provincial sport organizations in, I want to say it's 5. I could be wrong on that, but at least 5 of the provinces, they have 3 right now. And then beyond that, you also have to have 10,000 members. So, 10,000 athletes under your federation. So it's not an easy thing. It's not just that you can say, well, we run this really big event and lots of people do our sport and therefore recognize us. You have to show, besides just those basic things in Canada, they have to show they have a long-term athlete development plan. How do my athletes go from the beginner, recreational, child, youth stage to developing who my elite athletes are? Like, where are they at each stage of this process? How do we get them there? So there's a lot of responsibility to it. It's really the responsibility of growing the sport. It's not just, well, I have this event and lots of people do it and we like it. Like, it has to be very thought out. It's very methodical. And it takes a long time. But, we've had several countries that have the official recognition. Norway, I mentioned, Russia, Aruba. I think we got like 5 or 6. And the rest are kind of in the process. And again, the rules for a smaller country are different for the rules for a bigger country. But at the end of the day, we need the support of the community, because pretty much every country has some sort of requirement of you need this many members or this many athletes to show this is a legitimate sport that has a base of athletes doing it and you didn't just make it up.
Yeah. Do you have any idea how's the standard in Germany?
So we do have a federation in Germany and they're doing quite well. They just opened their club membership program. So now clubs, like the gyms, can become a club. Mm-hmm. I do believe that the membership requirement for National Olympic Committee recognition in Germany is, I think it's 10,000 members, in terms of 10,000 athletes, which from discussions I've had with them, is tough, because I think there are, that's pretty close to the number of athletes that are doing the sport in Germany. But they were looking into the requirements to see if that was, hard and fast, the number. But other than that, I don't know specifically exactly what they need, but I know that they're working really hard on it and they've been doing a really good job.
Cool. I guess it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, it is. That's the thing. It just takes time, right? And a lot of it is people still, probably our biggest issue is people hear about us and they're like, oh my gosh, why haven't I heard about this before? So getting the word out, right? Like you kind of figuring, like seeing it for the first time, being like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this existed. Yeah. So that's kind of, our biggest thing is trying to get the word out to people and understanding what we do. And I would say, in general, you guys over in Europe get it better and understand it faster than people do, kind of on my side of the world, and in the United States. It just, you guys understand in Europe that this is how sports work, right? You have clubs and all of that, and you have federations, and people get it a little bit quicker.
Okay. And like when I first started getting into the functional fitness world, I watched that YouTube clip, what's on the front page of CrossFit, what is CrossFit? And there's this one moment where I think it's Chris Spieler who says, I guess CrossFit is a sport now. Mm-hmm. And then he does a snatch and the crowd is erupting and freaking out. And I think that's interesting. Is it fair to say that the brand CrossFit invented the sport? And is that unique that a company like invents a training methodology which then turns into a sport? Is that unique on the landscape?
Yeah, I think it's unique to have a brand that's so dominant in the sport, really, that, this kind of originally came from them, this sort of idea of competition, and they really were the unopposed and kind of, leader of this sport, where there really wasn't a competing system, right? Because if you look at, I guess, OCR, obstacle course racing, would be a comparative thing where you could say, okay, maybe one of the brands like Spartan or Tough Mudder or something, maybe they invented it, but there wasn't a solo. I guess Spartan is probably the biggest, but there are a lot of competitors to Spartan as a company, as a brand, right? There was Spartan, there was Tough Mudder and Battle Frog and all these different things. Whereas kind of in the CrossFit space, there were small independent events, but there was never a brand, and there still isn't a brand that is as big as CrossFit to challenge them as an equal competitor. They're clearly the dominant brand. So I think that is, I would say, I guess, unique in the sporting space. Even if you think of something like MMA, right, where we think UFC is such a dominant brand in the MMA world, but there's several other competing brands on other sides of the world. There's one championship, which is bigger, I think, over in Asia. But so I think that the dominance of the brand is fairly unique in our space.
I think some weeks ago I was looking up Tough Mudder, and they were bought from Spartan, I guess, during the pandemic because they were struggling, and then Spartan bought them. But yeah, with all these brands like Spartan, High Rocks, like CrossFit, the Dubai Championships, or Wadapalooza, are you working together with them in any sense, or are your events like competing with their events, or is it like more a structure like we're working together with them? And I wonder if that's changed since the leadership switch at CrossFit.
Yeah, definitely is, we'll say, become more positive since the leadership change. We don't have any official agreements with any of the major brands right now in the space. We don't view what we're doing as competitive with them. I think it would be awesome if we could someday work out, an event series or something that somehow incorporates some of those major brands. I think it'll take time. But there might be a day eventually. Let's say we get into the Olympic Games and we're like, all right, well, we need to figure out, some sort of circuit that helps figure out who can qualify to different things. It would be great to work with some of those major brands on something like that. But to more specifically, I guess, answer the question that people probably want to know about the leadership change. Prior to that, I would say, I don't know, I never personally felt that we had an antagonistic relationship with CrossFit, but I worked for CrossFit HQ as one of their attorneys for several years. So, I had people who worked there who were friends. So I never felt that anyone was personally upset with me or anything. But there was this impression, I guess, that CrossFit was against what we were doing, and people were very afraid to get involved with us because they were afraid of being ostracized, afraid of being blacklisted by the brand. And that was a very real fear. And when the leadership change happened, Eric was very open to speaking with me and kind of getting to know what we were doing. I went out to a summit that they had last summer, which is, great of him to invite me to kind of extend sort of an olive branch, I guess. More than that there was anything that really needed to be resolved, but just even publicly for people to see, like, look, there wasn't an issue in the first place. So we have a much more cordial and friendly relationship now after that leadership change, and I hope that down the road that leads to more cooperation. I think it's just obviously things that everybody's trying to just make it work during the pandemic with events and everything like that. But it's hopefully as we get into post-pandemic life and things settle down, there'll be more opportunities to figure out, okay, how do we cooperate on these different things? How do we make this better for everybody? So I think it's positive. It's definitely a more positive relationship than it was.
Cool. Like, speaking of the pandemic, was it a setback for the sport, or like for the individuals, of course, yeah, for the athletes, of course, but was it a setback for you guys? Or because I was like, we had a scientist of soccer on the show 2 weeks ago or a few weeks ago, and he was like talking about the amateur level of soccer because he's big into that. And in Germany, it's like the professionals can train and play. There's still the soccer leagues are still working, but the amateur, they're not. Kids are not even allowed to go on the soccer field and play with each other. So it's basically like 1 year, which is completely missing from the point of like youth leagues or developing new people getting into the sport. But is that a huge setback for the sport of functional fitness too?
I think it's kind of a remains to be seen thing. I think we'll know the answer to that, in a couple of years. Maybe not even a couple of years, maybe a year or two. If we see that they're just, weren't as many people getting into it, or this kind of gap, I think it will have some effect. I do, because gyms were closed. I mean, pretty much everywhere around the world for at least some period of time. So people, aren't going to the gym, maybe aren't discovering the sport. People started realizing, oh, well, maybe I can just work out at home, so maybe I'm not going back to the gym. So I think the idea of getting people into the gym, there are less people going, at least during the pandemic there were, that will have some sort of effect of the number of people getting into the sport. I don't think it's something that can't be overcome. But I also don't think we know the extent of the issue yet, because in a lot of places, gyms are still closed, and that's something, we've been working with our national federations, or, we have calls and meetings every month to kind of figure out where everybody is and what's going on. And there's only so much we can do to support. And like you said, it is those elite athletes, those professional athletes have more opportunity to get around the rules and train and still practice, because like we talked about with the recognized sport thing, right? We have countries where they have that exception, and some of the countries that's actually nice, I guess, is the rules are a little bit more flexible, where it's not just the elite athletes, where if you're just a member of the federation, you can come in and train, or if you're signed up for certain events that are considered of national importance, so certain competitions, then you can go and train, which has been a help for us, right? Because people understand, oh, it's important that I'm involved in my national federation, because maybe the connection is wrong. Maybe we shouldn't be saying, oh, it's important for me to be with my national federation because that means I can get around the rules and go train. Maybe that's the wrong train of thought. But I think people see that advantage of like, oh, the national federation can help me in this way. So that's, I guess, a positive thing that's come out of the pandemic, is people realize the need and some of the advantages that come with having a sport that's recognized by the government as a legitimate thing. So that's been, I guess, a positive we didn't see coming out of the pandemic, was, that people would understand that benefit. But in terms of just the general population of people not getting into gyms, I think we'll overcome that, and I think the sport will overcome that. But I think when all said and done, we'll see that not as many people got into the sport for the first time, during the pandemic years.
Yeah, I hope it's all gonna work out. Like in Germany, gyms are closed still. I have no idea when they're gonna open, but we hope for the best. Gretchen, we're almost at the end. I want to give you the chance to plug some links and pages. Where can people find out more about the iF3 or get involved and things? And if there's anything you want to tell to the world, do it now.
Yeah. Sure. Awesome. So our website is functionalfitness.sport, and you can find just general information about the sport and the federation on there. Our most probably up-to-date, exciting information you can find on our Instagram or Facebook. At International Functional Fitness is our Instagram account. In terms of exciting things we have coming up, stay tuned for our World Championships. Right now, that's planned for Australia in November. And we also have a Masters World Championships coming up. It was originally planned for June. We're going to postpone that till the fall to make sure we can have an in-person event. So we plan some in-person events coming up in the fall. So make sure you're looking out for those so you can keep up with all the athletes who will be competing. And in next month, actually, May 25th, we have our first documentary coming out. That'll be available on iTunes and other streaming platforms. So we'll have a link soon if you want to pre-order that. And that's going to tell the story of our 2019 World Championships and talk a little bit about our mission and, what makes iF3 different and all our goals.
Cool. Can't wait about that. I think the Masters event was planned in Portugal, wasn't it? So that shifted, or
Yeah, we were going to shift that. We just decided we were planning to do that with a group called TAFISA, which is the Sport for All Association. And it was going to be really cool because it was going to be kind of like, had an Olympic feel to it because there were going to be other sports there. So it was a multi-sport event. But just, in kind of talking with TAFISA and seeing what their plans were, and looking at, what borders were and weren't open. We want to have an in-person event. We don't want it to be an online event. And we decided pushing it to the fall, and changing locations is going to be the best way for us to actually have an in-person event, which I think at the end of the day is what the athletes want.
Yeah. And the spectators too.
Yeah. Exactly.
I was remembering, like, there was one championship, like one event in New Zealand, I think, and they're like have the strictest, like, the borders are closed, you can't fly in, you can't fly out, like that, because it's an island, so they can do that. And there was this one functional fitness, like, national event, and I was watching it on YouTube, and I was like, there are 5,000 spectators. Is this from 2018? This can't be now. And I was looking it up and so, okay, they're pretty strict.
Yes, they're very strict. Them in Australia. We're hoping that'll work in our favor come the fall, but we're, monitoring the situation all the time. And as you know, things change daily. So
my fingers are crossed. So now at the end, I have the speed round, which is like, I give you a word or a name or anything, and you tell me the first word which comes to your mind.
Oh, okay.
Okay, are you ready? First thing, lockdown.
Oh, just let it be over.
Bodybuilding.
Definitely different from functional fitness.
Olympic lifting.
Very fun to do, but frustrating when you miss a lift.
The Olympics.
The ultimate goal.
CrossFit.
A definite passion and love doing it.
Fit is the new skinny.
Ooh. Okay. I mean, I'll go with that. I'll go with, I think I like strong as the new skinny better.
Okay. Eric Rosa.
I think I'll say hopeful. We'll say that.
Fikowski and Chung.
Ooh, that's a good one. I have good things to say about him. I think it's a leadership.
Jen Jones.
A friend.
Christy Phillips.
Definitely a really good friend. I'm going to see her today, actually.
Gymnastics.
My first love.
And the last one, running.
Oh, no, I hate that. Hate.
Gretchen, thank you very much to be on the show.
Oh, yeah, thank you for having me. This was really fun.